We'll call the meeting to order. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. I'll introduce the panel members first. I'm Marcel Laurando. I'm chairing. Diane Knight to my left, Richard Whitbread to my far left. The assessor today will be Tricia Caldwell, and our administrative assistant today is Katie Sutherland. We will be hearing applications for revision of assessment roll in accordance with Municipal Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application. We will limit the discussions to those matters. The statements that the applicant or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and those speaking to the matter must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessment of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council as independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decision with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to an application of exemption from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. I ask you to please put your phones on silent. Swear them in, please. Katie.
Please state your name. Tricia Caldwell. Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to present is the truth and the truth? I do. Please state your name. Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to present is the truth and the truth and nothing but the truth? I do.
Lend me a calculator.
I shouldn't need one.
I'll just grab one from that.
Grab two.
I need one too.
Please.
We're going to be dealing with 1450 Mountain Avenue, 3 different years. So we'll start with the 18, then we'll do the 19, and then we'll do the 20.
Sure.
So that everything flows in that order. We'll be here to carry that. When you are ready, read the roll number on it. Roll number. Have you changed the file number on all of them? Have you got the file number changed on your copies?
I changed them.
The file number on this one will be on 2018.
Yeah, it should be 4988.
Yeah, 4988. Okay, go for it.
Roll number 14041615000 for the 2018 roll year with the reference date of April 1st, 2016. We have an assessed value of $14,048,000. Now, I have to start by giving some history of this property, what's going on, and why everyone's so confused. This property was originally appealed for the 2018 cycle, and it was reduced at the board here. It was originally $16,860,000, and it was reduced at the board to $14,048,000, which is the same value that we have here. Page 12, I've included the Board of Revision order for that. In 2018, the City of Winnipeg Archives began occupying a portion of the space in this building, and the process that they use when they lease the space is to create a separate roll number because they are tax exempt. Well,
Sorry, I really apologize for interrupting, but there is a point of order that has to come before we proceed. And I'm, just for the board and the assessor to consider, there's a conflict of interest here. The city is a tenant. The city has deemed their space to be exempt, and there's a dispute right now with the landlord, because under the contract, the lease, the division of the exemption should go to all the tenants, even though the city space is exempt. Their method of calculating their share of the CAM is on a per square foot basis, regardless of exemptions. Like, it can't.
How is this point of order, Mr. Neufeld? I think
Because
you put that in your...
there's a conflict here, because they have a city employee, and it's a city benefit on the proportion of the taxation. And I'm just bringing it up so that it's on the record that there is a potential here. When things like this occur, I think the best thing should have been to bring in a third party to do this, just out of respect for everyone's situation, my own as well, because we know about this dispute on the allocation of taxes, and whatever is decided on the breakdown of it could end up being, it's because our taxable party is the taxing authority. So, transparency on the record. Thank you.
Continue, Trish.
let's see, where was I? So there was a separate rule created for the city portion, which was exempt, leaving the original rule number to the rest of the property. The owner then asked that it be reversed and everything be put back on. So I have to clarify, sorry. When we split the two, when we split it into two roll numbers, the total value equaled the $14,048,000 that was that the value was cut to. So then the owner wanted everything back on the original roll number. We did that, and again we put it to the Board of Revision value, and then a supplementary was sent out for 18-19, and that's how we got here.
Okay.
So everything in this brief is supporting the value that the board decided.
But there, at the time of the first hearing in 2018, there was no city portion.
That's correct.
That was tax-free.
It was on, there was no city portion.
No,
That's correct.
because we did not deal with that at that
Right.
time. So move ahead with the, we'll see where you end up
Okay.
in the end.
All right. So now there's one roll number. A portion of it is exempt. Now we have two income streams. One is taxable, one is exempt, according to whatever space the city uses from the building. All right, this is a one-story building. There's a portion of second floor offices. The effective year is 1985. It has wall heights of 10 and 29 feet. It's zoned M2 and has a land to plan area of 1.60. On page 2, you'll see the subject leases in place. As well, I've just put a little summary of what I just explained to you about the exempt roll number. You'll see some exterior photos of the subject property, and on page 4 you can see some overhead shots. Page 6, we have our cap rate chart. This is again for the 2016 reference year. 60% of our cap rates fell between 6% and 7.5%. Turning to page 6 of the brief, I'll go through the taxable portion of the workup, which is the storage warehouse. we have a total leasable area of 30,117 square feet and an overall rate of $5.40. Vacancy loss at 4%, expenses at 7%, a shortfall rate of $3.60, a cap rate of 7.5%, bringing us to our value for the taxable portion is $11,973,000. And on the following page, we have the exempt portion with a leasable area of 33,282 square feet at a rate of $5.40. Again, the vacancy of 4%, expenses at 7%, $3.60 for shortfall, 7.5% cap rate, for the total value of $2,075,000. And then on page 8, we have the summary of the two income streams. And the summary, our total estimated value is $14,048,000. This is, with the two income streams, an overall rent of $4.64. Page 9, I have some rent comparables. All of my comparables are in the subject market region with rents between $4.40 and $6.50 per square foot. And I think that's about it for my evidence. I just want to, again, say that this is all supporting the value that was cut previously at the board of revision to $14,048,000. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are there any questions, Mr. Neufeld?
I do have a few. I have an unusual request. Can I have 5 minutes?
You need a break?
Yeah, well, why I'm saying this is a new client for us, and I'm reviewing this statement. I wanted to just quickly run some numbers, if I could.
Let's take 5. Complication with already filed it. I might have you turn it back on again, we'll see.
What do you want to see?
I want to see the appeal. The appeal little file.
The application.
The application for appeal. What was asked for? Value classification, liability taxation. The roll takes off. Classification, liability taxation. So you put in these appeals.
Yes.
And you applied on all of them for
3.
all 3. Yeah, liability taxation above assessed value and classification of property.
Yes.
So you are asking for that then?
There will be some in there. Yes. And obviously, I have to present and show you what I'm looking for. It's a little bit different.
Then you open the window. Okay, then the window's open for us to deal with it. Okay, let's go with it. You're up, Mr.
Okay, no, it's questions.
No, it's questions.
Yes.
That's, I mean, you're up for questions.
Yes, and sorry, I had to get the right one. I think here we go. The evaluation here, was this all done by the model?
No, it wasn't.
Okay, so there were some changes in
Yeah.
overrides. What
Yeah.
were they?
The cap rate, well, the overall value, first of all, the cap rate,
Oh, because it's based on
yeah,
a previous order.
yeah.
Right, okay. Okay, yeah, I think that probably says it all. You're just, so you've changed, you've worked it up to match the previous order then.
Yes.
Okay, and this done to the best of your knowledge and abilities. Obviously, the order was deliberately vague, applicant's evidence. Was it straightforward enough for you to follow?
Oh, I think it was just the end value is what
Okay.
is overwritten.
And you weren't at that hearing?
No, I was not.
And when did the city take possession, do you know, of their space?
December 1st, 2018.
Well, that's when the lease commenced, but when did they take care and control of it? Do you know when?
December 1st, 2018.
Were they not in the space prior to that period? Doing leasehold improvements?
They could have been.
Okay. In your model, now, because this is all overwritten and you use the rate of 7.5%, so there's there's really nothing to defend this except a recalculation that like it's at, you placed it at the 80th percentile, but that wasn't, the decision was in reverse, right? It was calculated as possibly 7.5, and then coincidentally it was at the 80th percentile.
Yeah.
In your model, there are, the size of the building is a factor, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Those are my questions, thank you.
Richard, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. So
Diane?
just so that my head is on straight, 14,048 is the total. The tax exempt portion is 2,075,000, and the taxable portion of 11 million.
Correct.
You're using two different cap rates when you're calculating that out.
I think both have the same cap rate.
Oh, maybe that's in my error. Sorry, okay, my error. Got it. Thank you. Yes.
On each.
So what's your recommendation? Can you finish your question, Diane?
Yes, thank you.
Your recommendation was that we confirm the previous value that was given, and then you've made another recommendation that you also want us to split and make part of this tax exempt for the city.
We didn't recommend that. We've already done that. We had already done that.
Oh, you've already done it.
Yeah.
But this wasn't in the original file when we dealt with it back in 2018.
If this hadn't been done, this stuff wouldn't have gone, this wouldn't have gone forward. There would be no sub.
So this one is a sup as well? This 18?
Yes.
It's a sup to do this.
Yeah.
But you need,
Anytime you change the roll, because we had to change the roll back from 2 roll numbers to 1 roll number, anytime a sub is issued, whether it's the same amount or a different amount.
so that's why he appealed classification, is because you put this in here.
You'd have to ask him.
Well, it's just, this doesn't usually happen. I mean, that you slide in it.
We have plenty of exempt properties. What doesn't usually happen?
That you slide it in on a sub. I've never seen that how many years ago. Let's continue to hear what Mr. Newfeld has to say, and then we'll carry on from there. I'm still confused.
Well, I'm going to do my best to make it easier. Firstly, I have to say that we had never seen the previous period statements. Colliers took over management of this site after this all occurred. And since that time, we've been working on the property. We appealed for 2020, and there were two rolls. One was a separate exempt roll for the city, and then a taxable roll for the rest of the space. And we actually filed appeals on both because they should have been heard together. And then the owner had, several months prior to us filing, had written the tax department an objection letter saying that he had no business splitting the roll. We never advised you to split the roll. And so the city reacted very quickly, so within 8 or 9 months, they joined the roll, rejoined the roll. And that's how all these supplementals were issued. So first they split it, then they rejoined it. So what the carry forward on our appeal was that the resolution to the Board of Revision is they allowed us to carry forward and reapply for the supplementals and even use our appeal fee credit from the previous ones for this, because this was, the city admitted that they didn't have the authority to accept the rules. The reason why they did it is because in the lease it specifies that repayment or CAM costs, property tax costs are all done on a per square foot basis. So if the total tax bill in this case is about $350,000, the city is responsible for $33,000 out of $263,000, that percentage. So that's roughly about an eighth of it. The city is responsible for paying the taxes. And just because they exempt their space, they still are required to pay a share of the total tax load. So in order to get around this, the city exempted themselves and created their own role. So they can't, the Municipal Assessment Act doesn't give them the authority to bypass a written contract. So it is under debate. Now, in cases like this, and we've done a great deal of work with these partial exemptions, if there's consensus, agreement, full agreement with all the tenants in the site, you can go ahead and do it if the landlord consents, and they didn't consent, that's all. That's why we're here today. Now, when they went back in time, the first splitting of the roll was done May 1st, 2018. That's when the city split the roll and exempted their own piece of it. That was the date when they effectively took possession. Now, they were given a 6-month period of fixturing, which means during that time they were allowed to do whatever work they needed to turn it into their archives, but they had care and control of the site. It was not the landlord's site anymore. The lease term commenced December 1st, 2018, the end of the 6-month fixturing period. So in the original, in the first split, the city exempted from May 18 forward. Now, after they were told to rejoin the rolls, they decided to change their mind. And this is the first, these came out in sequence. So the first supplemental was issued May 1st, 2018. And what it did is it added the former city property back in and a full class 60 at $14 million.
And what was the date?
May 1st, 2018. So it was fully taxable, even though the city had care and control.
When was that granted?
This was issued October 17th, 2019.
So a year and a half later?
Yes.
Well, roughly a year and a bit.
Right.
Okay, so October 31st?
October 17th, 2019. I know that these are in the city's system. and I'll let you, if you want to look at these, my only copies, but you can look them up. So they then made that taxable, and then they issued a second supplemental for 2018. And that was dated December 1st. At that time, they moved
2019.
18, December 1st, 2018.
Okay.
So this is when.
Effective, you mean, sorry.
Effective.
Effective, okay.
Yes.
And when was it issued?
October 17th, 2019, same
Okay.
date as the
Same
other.
date.
I'll let you look at these.
Yeah.
Let me finish reading them. At that point, then they moved the 2 million back to 60 exempt. And that number was carried forward for 2019 value. And then 2020 was, which you'll hear later, there were no tricky parts on this. So what we're objecting to here is that when the city first split the road, they thought it was appropriate that as of May 1st, it was exempt. Then when they changed this, they said, well, let's make it December. It shouldn't be. They should be exempt right from the beginning, when they had care and control over it, which was, the lease was signed in, I don't know, April of 2018. The city took possession, which means that they technically own the site by virtue of their leasehold estate. There was a term that did start later, but in the lease, it's clear that there is a 6-month fixturing term, which the city has possession during that time. So the first thing we want is we want the exemption to begin May 2018. So those are the two orders, and I know the secretary has those in the city's website as well. So we're asking for, number one, exemption extended from May 1st onwards to December 31st, 2019 at the same rate. Now,
Can I interject something,
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Sure, go ahead.
Just a question for clarification. You can appreciate this is complex for those of us hearing this for the first time, just getting things sorted out. I know Mr. Warrendo has been involved in the past. May I just repeat what I've heard very briefly? So I've got the order right. So in April, a lease was signed April 2018 to bring the city into this property.
correct.
Okay? If I heard you correctly, because they understood that they wouldn't be exempt from all charges, they decided to create a second role
Yes.
in order to
Split
ensure
themselves.
everything that everything was exempt. When did that happen?
We don't know when I don't have that statement as to when they issued it. I know it was effective May 1st, 2018. I don't know when it was issued.
So while they had 6 months to fixture,
Yes.
they also
Were tax-free.
created the second role, so everything was exempt.
Yeah, their fixturing period in the former configuration, they were tax-free.
Yep.
But
Okay.
in this new configuration,
Hold on.
Yeah, sorry.
Hold on. Let's go. So the lease actually started December 1st, 2018. So
Sure.
they're in there quite a bit before the 2018,
they had the keys.
but they're exempt.
Not according to the current, not anymore.
No, but during that time, was it because they didn't have a lease, was the property owner responsible for all of the taxes on that space?
Under the fixturing period, all payments were waived for the first 6 months in the fixturing period,
Okay,
including all costs, including lease payments.
okay.
But the key in the act is there's an ownership implied because the city had the keys to the door, right? And in addition, they previously showed the rest of the world that May 1st was that effective date.
I hear you. Then on October 17th, a couple of orders,
A year later.
2019, a year and almost a half later.
Right.
City ordered to unsplit, and then on May 1, 18, so going retroactively back to that period,
Right.
which would make them exempt for only a portion of the tax.
Yes.
And similarly, December 1st, 2018, city was ordered, they were able to exempt themselves
Again, yes.
on December 1st, 2018.
Right.
So now we have a second roll again.
But both issues were ordered on the same date.
Yes, I understand that. Okay, so I seem to have
That's-
captured the essence of what you're telling us.
They, you know, in the first, when they first split the role, we have 6 months of dispute where I'm requesting that it be made exempt again because the city had care and control of the space. They had not begun the lease term, but they had a lease, right? And this fixturing period forms part of that term.
That's the implied contract that you're talking about.
Correct. And the granting of a leasehold estate, which means all the terms of the lease, with the exception of those dates, gave them their care and control from May 1st. They had their full rights at that date, which then means that that's when the exemption should have started. And I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but since the landlord is supposed to pick up the revenue during that period, or the taxes during that period, then it begs the question, is this, we can treat it one of two ways. One, it should go back to exempt, the landlord didn't have to pay out. Two, if it doesn't, then we have a non-recoverable. 6 months at $30 to $2 million is $25,000 in non-recoverables. So we do it one of two ways, right? We either claim the non-recoverable, or it goes back to being exempt. Because it's changed.
Well, let's wait until he's got a question, you know, because
Okay.
let's wait till he's finishing, and we'll ask him all his questions.
Okay, so that takes us, yeah, okay, and it'll be confusing enough. Now, getting back to what I said initially, I had never seen this statement, and this was a previous manager's statement, so we knew that after, the one that's in the assessor's brief, we knew that after that, things got got bad. However, when I read the lease, and I'm sitting here reading it, it looks like the number used for net income that the assessor is using is virtually identical to the number that the owner was actually experiencing. I noted that they had $1,217,000 in net income prior to application of the vacancy, and the assessor's workup is $1,222,000. So we're $5,000 apart in income. So I hadn't seen that before. So what we're intending on doing here is agreeing to the assessor's calculation of net income up until the non-recoverables. So the tax that the city, that the owner will lose because of this, then has to be retroactively placed onto the pending non-recoverable to this statement period. And I realize it didn't occur in this statement period, but we're not talking about a market interest here. We're talking about a physical thing that happened to them. So not market factors, but the physical condition as it existed. Someone took away their cost load, which they had in place. So the assessor's NOI should then therefore be reduced by the tax burden on the 2075, which is very approximate $26,000. So moving to page 8 of the assessor's brief, and I would submit then that the net operating income, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one again here. Oh, I see. Yeah, okay. So the $1,053,000 on page 8 then becomes $1,027,000.
What did you reduce it by?
$26,000.
26, okay.
for the additional cost of the city taking away the exemption. Now, that's one way of doing it. The other is simply to have the exemption start May 1st, and then I would say no adjustments are required.
Can I just ask the assessor a question? What is the date that this actually starts? This goes for the whole year.
Yes, it does.
It's not May, it starts the beginning of that year. Does it not?
I'm only taking an adjustment for half the year.
I know, but this goes back right to
It
the
goes to
beginning.
the first.
This goes to the first. Goes to January.
Right. Well, no, not the supplemental.
Yeah, the supplemental does.
No, it doesn't. Supplemental starts March 1st. That's what I appealed, the March 1st supplemental.
Yeah, but-
Guys, May 1st, I'm sorry.
But this supplemental goes back to January 1st, 2018.
Yes, it does.
Am I not correct?
No. No, that's the, I just handed you out the supplemental notice.
I,
Did you see this? 'Cause
this is too small for me.
I'm just finding it blurry for me. I thought I used your printer.
You want me to read it for you?
October. November, December 1st.
That should have been January 1st. We don't do a partial year.
You don't do a portion. Okay. So then it should,
Yeah, no, you do it all the time. You have to specify in your order, too, the periods under question. And you should have a copy of the supplemental notice.
You're okay with the May 1st, 2018 then?
yes.
Yeah, so she's okay with the May 1st, 2018?
Okay.
So we don't have to do that 25% change up now.
Well, if you
Go May
extend the,
1st, 2018.
if you extend the exemption to May 1st.
That's what we're gonna do. She's agreed to it.
Okay, well, then I don't have to think twice, let's just skip that whole thing. Okay, so we are agreeing to the net operating income, and then the only change, issue that we have with this, and with all due respect to the previous hearing, I'm under the impression that, I pretty much believe that the people who dealt with it last time were not aware of the early departure of Big Freight. And I know members sat on that. I know you can't testify to what they said and and they didn't say, even if you could remember it. But the Big Freight had a lease that ran to December 31st, 2016. Prior to April 1st, 2016, the owner was aware that they were vacating without paying penalties. So we had a vacancy going to come up, but it didn't actually happen in the reference year. But if you're told in the reference year you're going to have a vacancy, and your building is 260,000 square feet, and your tenant who occupies 98,512 square feet, 40% of the space, one tenant is leaving, that's a big chunk, and backfilling it is got to be accounted for somewhere in the risk level. So we believe going to an 8.5% cap rate is the best way of doing it. This is a potential purchaser, April 1st, 2016, said to him, and he was going to buy this property, and he said, oh yeah, by the way, Big Freight's moving, so you're going to have a vacancy for a year. A vacancy allowance is based on actual occurrences. Cap rate is based on the fear of the actual occurrence or the knowledge of an actual occurrence. So our number therefore becomes 12 million, overall number, 12,395,588, and that is with the assessor's revenue capped at 8.5 instead of 7.5. And the split on that would be the same percentage, which we're comfortable, we're agreeing with. which is $14.77% exempt and 85.23% taxable.
45.23?
85.
85.23 taxable, 14.77% exempt on 12,395,000. I'm going to do the rounding after because otherwise we will double round. So that would be an exempt of 1,830,828, rounded to 1,831,000, and taxable of 10,564,760, rounded to 10,565,000 as taxable, with a start date of May 1st on that.
That's your full presentation now?
That's it.
Do you have any questions, Tricia?
The vacancy rate, 20%.
No,
You
no.
reinstated
No,
that
yeah,
before, 100%?
I hadn't seen the statements and I saw the actual rate until Big Freight left was 2%. So I agree with your workup, everything there. The vacancy happened the following year, and the only question is a cap rate because knowledge of an impending vacancy would drive the price down.
Okay, thank you.
Richard, any questions?
No?
Diane, any questions?
Not now.
Crystal clear.
I still have one question.
Okay.
Here's my big one for you. Is the owner now supporting the splitting of this tax roll?
No, he wants to keep it like it is. He wants the one roll with different values for each site. And he does not want his hand forced. He's not against giving the city their exemption, you understand. The problem is that he's footing the bill under the contract for all the other tenants if the city feels that they should be fully exempt. So if you can get agreement from the other tenants and work out acceptance by all parties of this, that's fine. No one wants to take away their exemption. But under the previous system, it was not going to happen. So we want one roll. He wants it split in the values I've indicated. And he wants to allow the contract to be dealt with on that basis. There are 4 tenants at the time, and the new configuration, because they did reconfigure, there are now 6 units. So you've got to get a deal with all 6 units, not just one. Because it's not just the city's percentage, it's everybody else's. You've got other people who, for example, have to pay a 30% share of the taxes, and he's going to say to them, yeah, you're paying 30% of the taxable portion, not the whole thing. And you're paying 30% of 230,000 feet, and they said, well, my lease says 30% of 265,000. They sue, and they win. So the owner can't support it until he's allowed to attempt to make the changes. And that may even take 5 years or so because you have to wait till each term expires and then redo it. This is I've been involved in these disputes since the day I began in this business on tax splitting because property managers are lazy. You got a proportionate share. They think, well, it's really simple. It's math. You just work it out. It's not the way it works because, for example, there's different revenue streams for different parts of buildings. The leases should be written. You'll be taxed on the basis that the assessor taxes us. And then you have the flexibility to, like if you have a restaurant pad site on a big shopping mall, they're twice the tax rate. So they get their tax rate subsidized by the people in the mall. We know Walmart has been pushing this forever with their landlords, because, you know, their rents are like $8 and the rest of the mall might be $30. So they said, we're not subsidizing it. And it's the same concept right now.
So what does the city's lease say?
The city's lease says that they pay a proportionate share of the total. They pay 33,000 square feet of 265,000 square feet of the taxes.
That's what their lease says.
Yes.
So if that's what their lease says, they can exempt their portion.
They could exempt it, but everybody shares the savings.
So they're only exempting their portion.
No, everybody shares the savings. And the city knows about this, and the city is arguing with them, but they're fighting a losing battle. It happens on other properties too. 180 King, where the city is a part of a multi-tenanted property. Leases are written the same way. Now, doing work with the WHA in these multi-tenant facilities, we've been able to, behind the scenes, work with all the stakeholders and get an agreement on the exemption. Because, first of all, the owner and the tenants decided to appeal, right? It wasn't forced on them like the city forces the rule change on it. So we've had far greater success at exempting portions of space. Plus, in the case of the WHA, it actually states that they are allowed to have a proportionate share based on what they actually occupy and what their actual tax load is. Because some very smart person wrote that lease up. Who works at Collier's, not me. But it's just, you know what, it's an interesting part of this issue, but it does not pertain to the taxable amount and the question at hand. The question at hand is, we want to start pay to May 1st when it's inherent control, and we want a recognition of a higher cap rate to account for what was known at the time about a very, very large impending vacancy.
Good, thank you very much. Let's move on to the 19th.
Same.
Isn't it the same? Exact same.
The exact same?
Yeah. Except
Or for the
it
whole
would be
year.
for the full year, not just May.
Yeah. That's already, and you're asking for the exact same numbers.
Correct.
And now, let's move on. 20, everybody with me on that?
So this one's gone, I'm not sure if there's any one.
We're going to deal with January 2020. And this one is is this the same as well?
Pardon me? No. No.
No, you're up.
Should I read the roll number again?
Yep, please.
14041615000. For the 2020 roll year, we have an assessed value of $17,069,000. One and two-story building, effective year 1985, wall heights 10 and 29 feet. Zone M2, land defined area of 1.60. Page 2, there are now 3 property, or leases on the property. And I have the same photos on the next couple of pages. Page 5, the cap rate chart, 60% of our cap rates for the 2020 cycle fall between 6.34 and 7.8%. Page 6. We'll start with this storage warehouse taxable portion. We have a leasable area of 230,117 square feet with an overall rent of $4.91. Vacancy at 3.5%, expenses at 2%, shortfall rate of $3.75, cap rate of 7%. And the total of that income stream is $14,843,000. The second income stream, the exempt portion is 33,282 square feet at $5.09, 3.5% vacancy, 2% for expenses, shortfall rate of $3.75, 7% cap rate, bringing the total to $2,226,000. And we have the summary on page 8. The two income streams together. These are market value of $17,069,000. And the two income streams, that's an overall rent of $4.94. And on page 9, we have some rent comparables. All comparables in the subject market region with rents from $4.50 to $6.50 to support our table rates. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Questions, Mr. Nichol?
So then this property would have been done by the model?
Yes.
Okay. And this is the cap rate that then the model would generate at 7%.
Yes.
And you've applied a 3.5% vacancy.
It's model.
Right, model, and no non-recoverables. We were looking at previous year, there were non-recoverables of 7%. Now it's 2%.
Correct.
And you provided a statement on page 20 and forward, and of course, page 20 says the average space vacant in 2018 was 20%. But you've only allowed 3.5%?
Yes, this is model. We only adjust vacancy when there's chronic vacancy.
Right. Now, when you say chronic, what does that mean by chronic?
Ongoing vacancy issue.
Well, how about size of the vacancy? Did you notice what it was on page 21 in the statement?
No.
69.4% was the vacancy in this cash vacancy in the statement. And I'm calculating that from potential income of $1,458,000, actual income $446,000. So it has industrial vacancy and retail vacancy. Of course, actually they've split it into free rent vacancy. So ignoring the free rent, then 807,000, 55%. That's not chronic?
No, it has not been vacant for more than the cycle.
But on 260,000 square feet, that's 144,000 square feet of vacancy.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that we only adjust for
Okay.
vacancy.
So in the assessment world, if you're looking for length rather than strength of vacancy.
Correct.
Okay. And have you had a chance to review the property in the subsequent years? To establish whether or not this is a trend?
As in currently?
Okay. Now, you put in on your report, page 20, this is for calendar year 2018. Now, did you not have the statement for 2017?
Oh, that was,
See, I'm not.
that was an accident.
I'm not objecting to the post-reference.
Oh, no, that was a mistake.
Yeah, but do you have the 17 statement?
Do I have it with me?
Yeah.
I don't.
Okay. Well, we put it in our presentation on page 5. The same person signed this form. And that year, for 17, they said 40% vacancy. So now we have 2 years, one at 40% not, and one at 20%. Is that enough to be chronic?
No.
Under your rules, right?
Yep.
Right, okay. The rest of the world may differ, but your rules, it's not chronic yet. And when does it become chronic?
Don't know. After one cycle, for sure, maybe
Okay.
2 cycles.
Okay. But you heard me say earlier that 2016 also suffered a vacancy when Big Freight moved out. So that is our third year.
Okay, well, you just said that now, but in what they reported in their income and expense was they had 2% vacancy.
Yes, but that was, what year was that statement? 2015.
Correct.
So the 2016 statement, which neither of us has presented, would have the vacancy of Big Freight at 98,000 feet out of 265,000, so 37% vacant. So now we have 3 years in a row of vacancy in excess of 20%. Is that chronic yet?
Perhaps.
Okay. I was just wondering how far we could go with it. Okay. Those are my questions then, right here.
Richard,
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Diane,
No, no questions.
following your presentation.
Thank you. I can't read our statement. Do we have a clear copy of it in the?
We got the same kind of printer. There must be a problem with printers lately. Everything's blurry, or just eyes. Oh, you're a Spanish.
When it comes to smaller stuff, it's harder to read. Because
Has a 17 in
it's
the
the
19.
dark.
Like that.
Right. You did submit it, but it was in the brief before the split up.
Oh.
With the split up, okay. So it was actually in the file number, one of these ones that was withdrawn. So I don't know if you have it with you. So you can't, what we did is we submitted it here and you can't read the numbers. I have a clearer copy here, and potential income was $1,339,000. The vacancy was $683,000 for this, for the 2017 year. So that is 51% actually, that the statement shows. And the following year, 2018 statement, there was still a vacancy for, what did I say to the assessor, was another 50%. So it continued onwards with the vacancy problem to reach chronic stages. And the reason was that not only did they lose Big Freight, but they also had to turn over another tenant. But at that point, the city income hadn't hit the statements because the city income was all post-reference. They actually began getting money from the city in December of 2018, so the statements aren't going to reflect that at all. So we have several different vacancies over the 3-year period, ranging from a low of 20% and a high of 51%. And the 20% is based on the city taking occupancy of the space. So we think that that is a fair number to use for vacancy, 20%. They had a very large periodic vacancy, but after the city took space, they were still at 20%. And that's how we worked up our number, which was taking the value of of, I lost my page here, 1,339,30. Oh, sorry, I was looking at the wrong one, yes. 1,339,000 at 20%. And with that, we've added the actual non-recoverables, which are listed on the site, on this page, and we have two sets of non-recoverables here. One is $17,127 for non-recoverable repairs and maintenance, and then the other is non-recoverable general administration, which is advertising, accounting, professional fees, environmental and survey fees, legal consultant fees. We can even talk about commissions here, or TIs. So that's $104,000 actual. That number is reproduced very poorly on page 7 of our presentation. And so I'm just reading the numbers from a clearer copy, but the middle of the page, there's a total NR repairs and maintenance, 17,000, total NR general administration, 87,000. So we have taken that into consideration because we are working on the concept of starting with a potential rent of $1,339,000, which is potential rent as full. Rather than taking the 51% vacancy, we're using 20%, but we are taking the non-recoverables. We are also leaving 25 cents a foot for reserves, for a replacement reserve, and this would be roof replacement. And we're estimating the shortfall at $450, and that is based on the actual tax, an estimate in the utilities, and an estimate in the repairs and maintenance. Now, the repairs and maintenance, recoverable repairs and maintenance at the site on this time, and CAM costs, I should say, were 60, 100, 140, approximately $200,000, down from what we're using as our estimate because they were empty. A lot of places didn't need anything spent on, but you have to assume it's as full. And the actual utilities will not match up because many of these units are separately metered. So that was an estimate taken from the city's business assessment, which we're using for our purposes. So the big deduction from this number of 1,339,000 is is really the shortfall was the killer. It was such a high rate. Basically $500,000 is vacancy and shortfall from the statement, and on a 20% basis. Now the number, the actual income on our page 7, can't read it, but we have produced the number. The actual income is $368,413. That does not include amortization, depreciation, or mortgage. That is the actual NOI of the period with for the fiscal year 2017. So we're not using 368,000. We're using 670,000, which is twice as high, because we're adjusting the actual vacancy from 40% to 20%. And that gives us a value, again. Now, there is a contradictory situation here, which I'm thinking about. If you have an allocation for a bad vacancy, do you therefore have to continue to consider it in the cap rate, or do the two, is one application of a ratio enough? And I suggest it's probably adequate to just take one or the other. Well, you took a high cap when you know one's coming, but you haven't had it, and then you take a normalized cap because the application of a vacancy takes that. So I think we should change this, and I would never agree with 7%, but I think 7.5% is a reasonable number. So 670, 212, and a 7.5% cap rate is $8,936,160. And our calculation of the ratio is about the same ratio as last time, so I'll just use the same numbers again. So we're requesting that the exempt portion at 14.77% be $1,319,870, rounded to $1,320,000. And the taxable portion at 85.23% is 8,936,160 is $7,616,289, 7616289, rounded to $7,616,7616. Dramatic difference from the previous year because the reason is it's a big building, and I like the analogy of a big ship. If you have a little motorboat and you're putting along the waves and you want to make a quick turn, you can do it. It's maneuverable. You got a big ship, it takes you several miles to turn it because it's big. It's the same thing with a big building. You can fix a small building a lot quicker. One tenant, boom, you're fixed. You got 260,000 square feet, and you'll spend years trying to fix it, and that's why it changes. Now, in the next cycle coming up, we already know that the vacancy is going to be a little bit less, but it's still there because our last management report indicated there was still some vacant space in the building, but not as high. At that point, there will be a recovery of some sort, and then there'll be a reassessment in the general reassessment, and it'll acknowledge it, but we're having a bad year. And this is the same issue that we dealt with for 1100 Waverly, which is the building that was vacated by Manitoba Hydro. That's 130,000 square feet. When they built their new downtown building, it went from a tenancy of 130,000 feet to 15,000 feet. Crystal Bay Steakhouse stayed, and another little user stayed. And it was 6 years to reabsorb to the market. And during that time period, we did have a lot of debate with the assessment department. We did finally see that when big buildings suffer problems, it takes a long time to recover. The building is bleeding, hemorrhaging money right now. And that's because it's big. Now, if anyone remembers the history of this was a former furniture warehouse, and it was repurposed to become a multi-tenanted facility. That is our presentation. The actual income would, of course, indicate a value closer to about $5 million rather than the $8.9 million we're suggesting here today. And the only change I made in this was the cap. Just keeping it to a minimum.
I don't even know where to start.
Pick a
Get all
spot.
those numbers. Okay, so your rents, are those based on market rents?
No, their actual income.
They're actual. Is everything here actual?
Generally, everything except the application of a vacancy where we stabilized downwards from reported rates of 50 and 40% down to 20% to account for the city's lease, which and remember, our reference period is April 1st, 2018, at which time it was known that a lease was being signed with the city. So that's why we went to 20% instead of something higher.
Okay. For your shortfall, again, when I look at the statements, the tax doesn't match up with your tax amount here.
Okay.
They report a property tax of $286,842. That would be $1.11 per square foot.
286,942.
Utilities, they report 51,091, that would be 20 cents per square foot?
No, it's separate metering, so they won't be accurate. It's 286 and 17. Because there's a reason for this. Yeah. Yes, okay, I'm just making sure I'm safe ground here. That was the 2017 statement, and that was, the next year was 351,000. So it was based on, I think there were some prior period adjustments on this, but it's a question of, if you're stuck in the rut of pre-reference, post-reference, and your assessment is set at, let's just say 12 million, 14 million, whatever it is, it's not fair to go back and say, we're going to use the previous year's tax assessment, because that's not a proper value. Now, the right number to use would have been if we had accepted 14 million as an assessed value. The tax load is $350,000, so that's where we were coming from.
Okay. And when you talk about their net income, and not including mortgage and interest, and what about prior year adjustments? Do you include those?
Well, the prior year adjustments on this statement are
For free rent?
There's like they are on our page. 6. The numbers are $9,800 for an accrual from a previous year for recoveries. That's a negative number, and so that would drive it down. And then previous year accrual on property tax, $7,600. So there is a $17,400 prior period adjustment. It's rather small in the grand scheme of things. So 17,000 on, again, total income of 368,000 for which we didn't use, but we're basing it on a different vacancy rate. So that's going to be roughly 2.5%. Prior period adjustments. I think you see that that's a very stable number. The prior period adjustments, what happens in any revenue property is they'll do reconciliations in January for the previous year, and sometimes it'll be downward, sometimes it'll be upward, and you know, there'll be a variance. 2.5% is a variance. It's really acceptable.
Thank you.
Richard?
Nothing.
Diane?
No questions this time.
What are you using for your 7.5 cap? Just, I didn't see anything on it.
On page 41, this would be a multi-tenant B. So our Colliers tracking is between 7.25 and 8.25. So somewhere in that range would be the target. If all things considered the same, you would look at the midpoint somewhere around 7.75. In this case, we dropped it another quarter point because there was a majority of the risk has been addressed with vacancy. So again, you can't double dip risk. So we went to the lower end of that range. And now this property would be considered in our analysis. It has enough size, it has enough adequate space. The investment grade covenant strength is a little questionable, but it's got good lease durations. It's an older building, built in 1977, but it's still, it's going to show up in our study. You've heard me say many times that someone asks how come your study says this, and I'll answer, well, because our subject building is garbage. We don't track garbage. No, we would track this building. The big reason is it's worth $9 million at least, 9 to 14 million. We're not disputing that, depending what the vacancy is. You track those buildings.
I've got no more questions. So that will conclude the matters. Thank you very much.
Can I get my things back?
We're going to need it for the editing.
Yeah, I can make copies.
Okay.
Or yeah.
I think I have copies.
We're shutting her down here.